Hello everyone and welcome to today's session on web testing applications with TestComplete. My name is Nick Olivo, and over the course of the next 30 or 40 minutes we're going to discuss how you can test web pages with TestComplete. Now before we get started, I want to make sure that everybody can hear me okay. So if you could please locate this panel that you see here on your screen and type the word sound into the Q&A panel just so let me know that you can hear me. If you don't see this panel right away, it's probably been minimized down to this small toolbar up in the right corner of your screen. Just click on this arrow button here to maximize the panel to its full size, and then you'll be able to go ahead and type in there. Outstanding. All right, folks are chiming in here. Wow, you guys type fast. Awesome. Okay, so it sounds like everybody can hear me okay. Fantastic. One other thing, just want to make sure you can see my mouse moving properly. So if you see my mouse moving around the top right corner of my screen right now, just go ahead and type the word mouse into the Q&A panel just to make sure that the visuals are going through okay for everybody. All right, fantastic. Okay, so a couple of housekeeping notes before we get started. For starters, we are recording this session, and you will be receiving a link to that recording either later on this week or early next week. And second, there will be a Q&A session at the end of this presentation, and I'll try to field some questions real time as well. So as we're going along, if you have questions, just put them into that same Q&A box that you just typed into, and I'll do my best to get to those. All right, now let's go ahead and talk about what we're going to discuss today. We're going to talk about the 3 different checkpoints that are specific to web testing. We'll also learn a little bit about name mapping and how that can be used in your web tests. Then we'll talk about the supported environments and web technologies that TestComplete can work with. And then finally, we'll do some Q&A. All right, so let's dive right in here. To illustrate some of TestComplete's web testing capabilities, we're going to perform a couple of different test cases. Our first test case will verify that a web page's contents are correct and that controls on that web page are accessible to screen readers and other assistive technologies. Our second test case will add a new post to a blog, and that'll help us show off some of the name mapping features that TestComplete provides. And our final test case will show how TestComplete can go under the hood and perform some tests against a web service. All right, I think that's enough PowerPoint for right now. I'm going to go ahead and just jump right into TestComplete and let's get rolling. So, first thing that we want to do is create a new project. And I'll just click the Create New Project button. Give my project a more descriptive name here. I'm going to call this Web Demo 12.7. And I'll click Next. We're going to choose the web application type here in this next dialog. Go ahead and click that. And then, as you can see, we have a couple of different ways we can work with web-based applications. You can perform functional testing of web pages, load testing, and web service testing. Today we're going to be touching on both functional testing and web service testing, but for right now we're just going to get started by clicking on functional testing. Okay, now the great thing about TestComplete is it allows you to specify the website you want to test, the browser you want to test it with, and you can have TestComplete automatically invoke the browser to that website when you start recording your tests. And you do that just by clicking on this Add button right here. That autofills an entry in this grid. You can see that TestComplete has detected all of these supported browsers that are currently running on my system. Right now I'm just going to keep the default of Internet Explorer 32-bit. And I can fill in the URL for the website that I want to test, which in my case is this guy right here. And then this Autorun checkbox is what's going to have TestComplete automatically invoke the browser to that URL when we start recording our test. Okay, so I'll click Next here. And of course the last screen in the dialog is to choose your scripting language, which in my case is, as always, good old JScript. Alright, so now our project's been created and we're ready to start recording our test. So we'll go ahead and click the Record New Test button. As always, TestComplete will minimize down to that small recording toolbar, and at this point, TestComplete automatically invokes the browser out to that URL. So now I don't need to worry about, going in and monkeying around with the Start menu or making sure I've got a shortcut or a favorite handy. TestComplete just loads it right up for me. Okay, so now what we're going to do is click on the Books hyperlink right here on our website. That takes me to this nice little website which I can purchase these cookbooks from, and what I want to do right now is make sure that all the content on this website is correct. And the way I'm going to do that is with a special checkpoint called a web comparison checkpoint. Now, just like all the other checkpoints, you can create a web comparison checkpoint just by coming up to the recording toolbar here and then choosing Create Web Comparison Checkpoint. And what this is going to allow me to do is select the web page that I want to work with just by dragging the crosshairs tool over that web page, release the mouse, and TestComplete captures a reference to that page. I'm going to give this a more descriptive name. I'm going to call this the Books Storefront. And now there's a couple of different ways TestComplete can compare content on this page. For starters, we can compare the entire page, which means all the images, all the text, all the buttons, everything. We're going to look at the source of this page and make sure that it matches exactly, character for character. But if you've got dynamic content on your pages, maybe you've got a rolling banner graphic, or maybe you've got information that updates real time, then comparing the entire page may not be exactly what you need. So for that, we offer a couple of different ways that you can compare content in your websites. For starters, we've got this compare only tag structure option. And what that does is TestComplete will look at this page and say, okay, you've got 27 hyperlinks, 16 images, and a couple of tables. I'm going to make sure that you've got those items again when the test runs. So it won't matter what the contents of those tags are, but it's going to make sure you've got 27 hyperlink tags, 27 image tags, and the number of table tags as well. And then finally, maybe all you care about is pictures. You just want to make sure that the images on the site are correct. In that case, you can say only compare these tags here, and then choose the tags that are most relevant for you. You can choose from links, images, or input elements. So those are a couple of different ways that you can compare content on a website. I'm going to take the default of compare entire page and click OK. All right, so we've just verified that that page is accurate, and now we're going to move on a little further here. I'm going to click on the best grilling recipes because, hey, I like to barbecue. Now we get in here, and the next thing that I want to do is verify that my website is accessible for screen readers. I'm sure that some of you out there have to work with Section 508 compliance, which is to make sure that websites and other applications are accessible to folks who use things like screen readers and other assistive technologies. And TestComplete allows you to verify like all the alt text on this screen has been specified with a single checkpoint, which is called, creatively enough, a web accessibility checkpoint. I'm just going to go ahead and create one of those right now. Just like what you saw me do with the web comparison checkpoint, I'm going to select the web page using the Finder tool here. There we go, we got that selected. TestComplete grabs a reference to it. I'm going to call this the grilling checkpoint. And now there's a bunch of information that this particular checkpoint can verify. I mentioned already that we can verify alt attributes. And what that's going to do is look for every picture, every button, every input text field that we've got on screen, and make sure that anything that the user could manipulate has alt text assigned to it. Then we've also got other things here, like this mail to link. This is going to make sure that there is a contact us type of hyperlink somewhere on the web page. You can also verify image sizes are accurate inside your site. This title tag will help verify that information like what you see here, where it says best grilling recipes, that you don't have things that just say like blank tab, that there's actually text specified there. Link accessibility will help you verify that there are no broken hyperlinks on a web page. That may be something that you're interested in doing. And then these other ones here, ActiveX, Applet, and multimedia links, these will verify that those types of content are not on the web page, because sometimes those types of content are not accessible to assistive technologies. So you may want to verify that those types of things are not present on your website. So for right now, the only thing I really care about is the alt attribute. So I'm going to select that and click OK. All right, that's done. Now I'm going to close my browser down. This will be a very simple test here. And then we'll stop recording, again, just by clicking on the good old stop button right there. And as always, TestComplete will take the actions we just performed and render them as a keyword test. And just like always, we can follow along with what's listed here to see exactly what our test is doing. Okay, so now we've got our checkpoints created, and if you ever want to see exactly what a checkpoint is doing, you can right-click on it and say, go to Checkpoints Data Editor. So I've just selected the web comparison checkpoint. Let's go to that data editor. Okay, and what you see right now is this is the actual source of that page. This is all the HTML that makes up that web page. And TestComplete is going to verify that this HTML is consistent when we replay the test. And if you want to make changes to the checkpoint's behavior, no sweat. Just click on the drop-down right here, and you could say, really, all I care about is the tags, or maybe I only care about one specific tag. You make your change, click this Update button, and then that's how TestComplete will interpret the web page. Okay, and then same type of thing for the web accessibility checkpoint. Again, we'll right-click, say go to the editor, and here you go. You can change whatever type of information you want the checkpoint to validate. Okay, so we've got our test created. Now let's go ahead and run that test and see what we get. So, as always, I'm going to take my hands away from the keyboard and the mouse. TestComplete's going to drive the system. Here we go. We've gone out to our website. We're going to start out by verifying all the contents of that page here in this bookstore, and then we'll go in and perform the accessibility checkpoint on this web page right here. Now, an accessibility checkpoint can take a few seconds to complete because it's looking at every single object on screen and verifying that the alt text is correct. So it may take 20 or 30 seconds to complete an accessibility checkpoint, but the alternative would be to have you manually look at a web page's source code and look for every instance of every tag and look for alt text, or you'd have to create individual property checkpoints for every object on screen and verify their alt text. Either way, those things would be extremely tedious, and so web accessibility checkpoint is really fast when you compare it to that. Okay, so now you can see our test has finished running, and our web comparison checkpoint was successful, so that's outstanding. But now our grilling checkpoint, the accessibility checkpoint, failed. So let's take a look at that in a little bit more detail. If you come down here, you can see that the alt attribute for this control right here, this write review, was not specified. So TestComplete is telling us exactly which controls within our web page don't have alt text assigned to them and thus are not accessible. So that means that this site would fail Section 508 compliance. So what I'd do at this point is I would take this information, I'd right-click on my test log and say export. That would generate an HTML file that I could then attach to a defect report, give to my developers, and say, okay guys, here are the controls that you need to enhance in order to get true Section 508 compliance going on here. Okay, so we've talked about two of our three special checkpoints, and the third one's a little bit more advanced, so I'm going to save that one for later. I do see a question here from Manoj who's asking, how much time do you think it takes to verify all the attributes when I run all of the checkpoints, and how much if I only check one attribute? Well, you can see here that from the time we ran this test, from the time that button got clicked, and let me zoom in on this guy for you, it was 12:12 and 50 seconds, and when the checkpoint completed, it was 12:13 and 6 seconds. So that checkpoint took 16 seconds to complete, which isn't really that bad, given that there were, probably about 150, 200 controls on that particular web page. So that's pretty fast in the grand scheme of things. So it's going to depend on how much stuff is inside, but it really is pretty quick when you look at the time compared to the total number of objects that are being compared. Okay, so let's see. Next question is, can I check Ajax controls postback happening through the checkpoint? You could verify that an Ajax control is retrieving the proper information with different types of checkpoints there. Padmasri, yeah, you could. You could verify that the combo box, for example, had populated with the appropriate values. Okay. All right. Now, so what I want to do next is talk about how TestComplete's name mapping can work with your web tests. I know that a lot of you have been on webinars with me before, and you know that name mapping provides a way for you to recognize the objects inside your application. And what I want to do right now is record a new test against a different website, and let's go ahead and create a new blog post. And that blog post will allow us to create some information in our name map. So first thing I want to do is double-click on my Tested Apps node right here, and I want to add a new web page to be tested. So I'm just going to right-click here, and I'm going to say Add Web Page. And just like before, it's going to prompt me for the page URL. I'll just fill that right in there. And again, I can choose which browser I want to work with. In my case, it'll be the Internet Explorer, 32-bit version there. Click OK. All right, now when I start recording, I want to have TestComplete automatically launch that page I just created, or loaded, I should say. So I'm going to check this auto run box, and I'm going to uncheck the auto run box from the original page that I started at the beginning of the session because I don't want to load up my storefront site right now. So what I'm going to do is now just go ahead and we will start the recording process anew. Click Record Keyword Test. Once again, TestComplete minimizes down, and now it's going to load up that other website. Here we go. We're on the admin screens here where we can actually go ahead and create our content. So I'm going to log in as admin at yourstore.com with my super secret password of admin. I don't want to be remembered, so we'll go ahead and log in. All right, so now we're inside the website, and we need to get to our blog pages. So I'm going to click on the Content Management link. I'll go to Manage My Blog, Manage Blog Entries, a little bit of nested stuff going on here, and then finally, I will click the Add New button right here. Okay, so now let's fill in some content here. Blog entry title, let's call this webinar, and our content will be web testing with TestComplete. There we go. Okay, and now I'm going to save that. Okay, so that'll post my blog entry. And now what I want to do is go back to the main site. We'll go ahead and we'll just click Save again just to make sure that took. Okay, go back to the blog entry list. And now I'm going to go back to my storefront itself. And I want to verify that that blog post loaded. Do that by going to the blog section right here. Now let's add some comments to that post. We'll say, we'll click on the comments link, and then we'll put in our comment. We'll say, this is comment 1, say new comment, and we'll put in hello world into this one because you know what? Every demo needs a hello world statement somewhere in there. All right, fantastic. That's everything I want to do here. We're going to close the browser down at this point. I'll stop recording. And again, TestComplete will take a moment and generate all of the actions that we just performed into a keyword test. Okay, see a bunch of people are asking questions right now. That's fantastic. Keep those coming. I'm going to be getting to all those toward the end of the session. So if you've got a question, just toss it right in there, and I will get to it toward the end of the session. All right. One thing to note, though, if you do have questions about things like pricing, or you've got a specific tech support issue that doesn't seem to be working properly or things like that, this probably isn't the best forum for those types of questions. So if you do have a pricing question or a question about how many licenses for a certain thing you'd need, best bet is to talk to your account rep about those types of things. And in terms of other types of questions, if you've got a specific control that's causing you problems, please just send those over to our support team, and they'll be able to help you out. Okay, so now I'm going to go ahead, and our test is just about done. There we go. Test has been completed, and you can see all the actions that I just recorded are showing up here now. One thing I'm noticing as I'm looking through here, there's this one section where I fat-fingered when I was typing. You can see that I typed T-E-T instead of T-E-S-T, and TestComplete recorded backspacing there. So I'm just going to double-click on this guy and edit him so that we don't have to watch TestComplete backspace characters for me. There we go. Okay, so webinar testing with TestComplete. There we go. Fantastic. All right, so now we got our test recorded. Let's go ahead and run this guy. So just like what you saw earlier, we're going to kick off and run through the scenario we just recorded. But I'm going to, spoiler alert here, folks, I'm going to tell you right now, this test is going to fail because it won't be able to find the blog post that we're looking for. So we'll talk about that in just a minute here. Okay, but we're logging in right now. So as you can see, TestComplete is working with the web-based application controls. No problem at all. We can fill in fields. We can click on hyperlinks. We can click buttons. And we work really well with pages that are created in this case, it's ASPX, but we also work with other technologies like ASP or Ajax or things like that. And we'll talk a little bit more about that in just a minute. Okay, so now we're going to click that Add New button. We'll fill in my text field here, webinar, and then our webinar body. There we go, and then we'll save it. All right, now we're back on our site, and we're going to go to the blog itself. Here we go. And now we're going to try and add comments to that blog entry that we just created. You can see in the top right corner of my screen, TestComplete is displaying a message saying, waiting for the link comments 0 object. And we're not going to be able to find it. And here we go. We get our error message in our test log. And the log is going to tell us exactly what went wrong here. So, you see all these other actions that we performed work successfully. We were able to log in. We were able to enter our text. But right here, this object does not exist error. This is where we are encountering problems. And you can see in the log, what we're saying here is that we couldn't find the link comments 0 object. We couldn't click it. What TestComplete does in the name map is it tells you the object that it was expecting to find, and then the object within that hierarchy that was missing. So in our case, if we scroll to the right here, the object we were looking for is this guy right here, link comment 0. The object we couldn't find was link comment 0. Sometimes you're going to be missing an object in the upper hierarchy, and then TestComplete would just say, okay, I couldn't find panel master wrapper center, for example. But right now we know that it's the link comments 0 hyperlink that we couldn't locate. So let's dig in and figure out what's going on there. I'm going to double click on this error in the log file, and that jumps me right to the entry in the keyword test that caused the problem. Okay, so we couldn't find link comment 0. So now I'm going to right click on this control and say show object in name mapping editor. And that brings up a list of all the controls that I've recorded against so far. And now here, these are the properties that we're using in order to recognize that hyperlink. So what I want to do now is look at that control with our object spy and see what TestComplete sees right now and compare that to what TestComplete was expecting. So I'm going to click on the object spy link right here and then drag this finder tool right over the comments hyperlink. Oops, and I missed it there. Let's try that again. Okay, let's try that one more time. There we go. A little bit of operator error there. I'm so excited my hands are shaking. Okay, here we go. Now let's come back into TestComplete, and we can see that, all right, our object type, yeah, that's right, that's a link. Our object identifier is 1 and 1. That's good. Our inner text, comment 0, comment 0. But this guy, name prop string, we're expecting to find 21, but right now we're finding 22. And that's because when the test was recorded, it recorded us creating blog post number 21. When the test replayed, we were creating blog post 22. And if we play the test again, it'll be 23, and then 24, and so on. So TestComplete is always looking for a control that has that value hard-coded inside of it. And that's what's causing the problem. That's why TestComplete can't find the control. So what we're going to do is wildcard this property in the name map so that it won't matter what number we encounter. So I'm going to go ahead and click the ellipses button right here. And I'm going to change this 21 to an asterisk. And now, no matter what TestComplete finds there, whether it's 21 or 73 or 99, TestComplete will locate the control successfully. So, okay, we've got that done now. Let's come back into our test, and we'll run from this point, from the point where we click in the comments section. So we'll say run from selected operation. And now TestComplete will kick over, and we should be able to click on the comments link. There we go. Great. And now we're going to start putting in our comments, right? Well, no. In fact, again, you can see that TestComplete is waiting for a page object to be displayed. And we're going to have to wait for a minute here to see what happens. Okay, we get another failure in our test log. And this time around, looks like it might be a similar situation. We're getting a message stating that the object does not exist. So I'm going to look inside my log file here, and it's saying, okay, we couldn't find this particular page, your store name 1. All right. So same troubleshooting process. I'm going to double click on the log file here, which takes me to the entry in the keyword test that caused the problem. I'll right click on the entry in the keyword test and say show object in name mapping editor. And here we go. Here's the page object that we couldn't find. And hey, look right there. You can see that we recorded the blog ID number inside the actual URL of the web page. If we look at the website, all right, I'm going to zoom in on this guy right here. You can see that the URL contains the number of the blog post. So when you're doing your web tests, watch for things like this in your browser's address bar, because if you see things like dynamically generated session IDs or numbers that increment as the tests run, those are places where you're going to need to use TestComplete's name map in order to accommodate those types of situations. So for right now, the approach to fix this is exactly the same as what we just did a minute ago. We're going to wildcard out that 21, click OK, save our project, and then we'll run from here, and now the test will finish successfully. So just keep an eye out for places in your websites where dynamically generated information is being shown in your URLs, because this is something that happens a lot. I talk with a lot of customers who encounter this problem. You know, we get on a phone, we do a demo, and usually it's just a simple matter of throwing in a couple of stars, and then everything runs fine. So keep that in mind as you're doing your testing. Okay, so now there's a whole lot more to name mapping than just wildcards. So much more, in fact, that we've actually got a separate webinar planned for next week where we just talk about name mapping and all the capabilities that it provides. So stay tuned. I'll be showing you when that webinar is and date and time information for that at the end of this session. All right, now wildcarding in the name map is all well and good, but sometimes it's just not enough. Sometimes you've got a web page that is just so dynamic in nature that no amount of wildcarding is going to make life good for you. And let's take a look at an example of that right now. I'm going to bring back my Object Spy tool here, and I'm going to point at the Open All button that you see right here in this website, this little feed reader. Now this feed reader is empty right now, and I've done that intentionally to help simplify how things are going to look in just a second. Okay, so I've selected the Open All button. Okay, now what I'm going to do is click this button right here, which is to highlight the object in the overall object tree. Okay, so we'll click that button. And you can see TestComplete just built the object's hierarchy. So here's my button that I care about. And then all these controls from here down, these are all parent controls for that particular object. And you'll notice that a bunch of these have numerics associated with them. 1006, 1007, 44, 43, 41, 40, 32, 31. Every one of those numbers is dynamically generated, which would mean that if I wanted to wildcard these, I would have to wildcard like 10 different controls just to get down to this one button. That's bad, and that would be extremely tedious and time-consuming and, quite frankly, painful. So in cases like that, we don't want to have to deal with that. What we want to do is just say, okay, TestComplete, I want you to flatten this web page out. Don't worry about the object hierarchy. Just look at the web page from, say, the document object model perspective. And to do that, come in here, double-click on your project name, come down to the Properties panel, and then go to Open Applications, Web Testing. And you'll see right here we've got this tree model, and this allows you to specify how TestComplete will look at your web pages. The default is tree, which gives you the overall object hierarchy, which is good because usually that's pretty stable and reliable. But in extreme cases, like the one I just showed you, it's not helpful. So in cases like that, we want to use the DOM, which is, TestComplete will just look at the web page and see all elements on that web page at the same level. So we don't need to worry about the hierarchy anymore. There are two other choices here. Tag is if you just want to look at the hyperlinks, or just at the tag structure, I should say. So if you just want to see hyperlinks or images or whatnot, you can do that. And then hybrid is actually just for backward compatibility with old TestComplete projects. So if you are migrating up from, say, TestComplete 4, this would be an option you can choose. But most people probably won't be doing that. So we'll just choose DOM right here. I'll click Save. And I'm going to bring the Object Spy back, and we're going to look at that control again. It takes a second for TestComplete to update my project here. We'll just drag the Finder tool over the Open All button. Okay, here we go. Whoops. Got a little ahead of myself there. Okay, so there's my Open All button. I'm going to click the Highlight Object in the tree again, and this time around, instead of seeing that nasty, nested, dynamically generated content, you see all the controls at the same level. So now it doesn't matter how much of the parent controls are dynamically generated, you're always going to find the control at the right level. One thing you will want to note, though, is we are recognizing this based on the name the developers gave it, which is EXT Gen 51. We may want to ask our developers to give that a more intuitive ID so that it's a little more easy to understand about what's going on here. But it's a lot easier for them to make that change in one place as opposed to having to make it for the 10 or 12 container objects for every control in your website. Okay, so that's a little bit about TestComplete's DOM mapping capabilities. All right, now let's talk about that final checkpoint that I mentioned earlier, which was to create tests against a web service. So I'm going to come back in here to my project workspace, and the first thing I want to do is give my project the capability to test web services. And that's easy enough to do. You just right-click, say Add New Item, and then you scroll down here until you find web services. Now, you may be wondering, well, Nick, why would I want to be testing web services? Well, the answer is, chances are when your developers are building your application, they start out on the back end. They build the database, they build the stored procedures, they build the web service methods, and then they build the UI. So you could be sitting there waiting until a very late stage in the game before you're able to do testing. By testing a web service directly, you're able to verify that the code is working before the UI gets delivered to you, which means it's a lot more effective and you get a lot more testing done sooner, so that when the UI does get dropped, you've already verified that the back-end functionality is working properly. Okay, so we've got that web services node added now. So let's specify the web service that we want to test. And in my case, I've got a simple web service out there that just takes temperatures and converts them from Celsius to Fahrenheit and back again. So I'm going to call my service the temp conversion service. And we'll click OK. All right, now we've got that defined. We need to pick the actual URL where our web service lives. And in my case, it's this guy right here. So you just type in the URL to your WSDL. And then you click Get Services. And click OK. Now, TestComplete is showing you a list of all the methods that live out at that web service. And just to prove that to you, let's go ahead and take a look. Here's the actual WSDL for that web service, and you can see it's got two methods, Celsius to Fahrenheit, Fahrenheit to Celsius, and that's exactly what TestComplete sees here as well. Okay, so let's go ahead and create a checkpoint that's going to verify that our Celsius to Fahrenheit method is working properly. I've been doing everything today so far inside of Keyword Editor, so let's show those folks who like scripting some love and go ahead and do this one in script. I'm going to go ahead and create a web services checkpoint just by clicking on this drop down right here. TestComplete says, okay, great. Which web service do you want to use? I want to use the temp conversion service. All right, which method within that service do we want to work with here? We want the Celsius to Fahrenheit method. All right, click Next. Okay, now Celsius, we're going to pass in 0 because off the top of my head, I know that 0 degrees Celsius is 32 degrees Fahrenheit. Go ahead and click Next. And now what you're looking at is the actual response from that web service. So TestComplete just called out to that method and passed in the parameter 0, and this is the actual server response that we should get back for that method. So we're going to verify that 32 is coming back when we pass in 0. What we're going to do is actually take this response, this is just an XML file, we're going to save this inside of our project as a baseline for future comparison. So I'm going to go ahead and click Finish. And now you can see over here on the left side of my screen, we've just added the Celsius to Fahrenheit node into the XML stores section. So that's the actual baseline item that we're going to compare with when this test runs. Okay, so we've got this code here. I'm just going to copy that to my clipboard, build in a quick little function here, paste that, and I pasted an empty string. Okay, great. Hang on. We'll do another web service checkpoint to verify that. 1 second, folks. It's one downside when you get a little too quick on the keys, you can go ahead and just paste in something you didn't mean to. Copy, right-click, paste. There we go. Okay. So now if you look at the code, the first line here, line 3, that's actually calling the web service and passing it that parameter of 0. Line 4 is performing the actual comparison to make sure that the information is correct. So now let's go ahead, we'll run this test. and TestComplete will come back and say, hey, yes, that passed. I need to save my project first, though. That's a little handy reminder that TestComplete gives me before I run my tests. There we go. Okay, so now we're going to call out that web service and verify we got the appropriate information. But now you may be wondering, well, that's great, Nick, but what's it going to look like if that checkpoint fails? All right, no problem. Let's double-click on the checkpoint here on Celsius to Fahrenheit 2. I'm going to come down here into the soap body section, and I'm going to change our expected value from 32 to 33. All right, so that will fail. All right, now we can go ahead. We'll run this test again, which is in the unit here. All right, our test is just run. You can see here we've got an error message. It's telling us that, okay, the checkpoint failed. And then we got this XML comparison results node here. We can click on the details link that you see on the right-hand side right here. And that brings up this comparison section, which shows us the actual tag structure between the two XML files. So we can scroll through here and we find the node that was changed. And down here in the bottom portion of my screen, this is the information we were expecting, 33. This is the information we actually found, 32. So at this point, I know exactly where things went wrong. And if you've got a really big, complicated XML file, you can just see what's different by unchecking this equal box. And now we only see those nodes which are different. One other thing to mention about the web comparison, or excuse me, the web services checkpoint, just like those other ones, we have the ability to edit the checkpoint after it's been created. For example, you may want to ignore prefixes or attributes or node order inside your XML files and your web service responses, and that's easy enough to do. Just uncheck these boxes and you're good to go. Okay, now one thing that a lot of folks ask me about is, okay, Nick, I've got all my tests created and I recorded them against a server. Let's say I recorded them against QA Server 1. And now I want to run those same tests against QA Server 2. What's the best way for me to handle that? Well, in that case, I'd say you head over to the name map. And as you can see, I'll zoom in here, we're storing the actual name of the server inside of the name map for all the pages that you've created. So to modify that, again, we're just going to use name mapping to wildcard these things. We'll just say find and replace. And you would replace localhost, or whatever your server's name is, with a star. Now we say replace all, and now that's going to allow you to run these tests on any server. It won't matter which, as long as the rest of the URL structure there is consistent. So that's how you can get your tests to run against QA Server 2, QA Server 4, or what have you. Okay, so that's everything I wanted to actually demo live right now. I'm going to jump back into PowerPoint for a few more slides, and then we'll jump right into your questions. Okay, so in terms of supported browsers, TestComplete works with Internet Explorer 5 through 8 and Mozilla Firefox 1.5 through 3.6. And in terms of supported technologies, TestComplete can work with web pages that are created in pretty much anything. So it doesn't matter if you are building pages in ASP, ASP.NET, Cold Fusion, PHP, plain old HTML, won't matter. TestComplete will be able to work with that. Now, some of you out there may be saying, well, Nick, will TestComplete work with web-based third-party controls like Telerik or Infragistics? And we do support a lot of those types of controls. I'm actually pasting a link to a website that contains a list of all of the supported controls into the chat panel right now. So if you look at your GoToWebinar toolbar, you should see a little blinking text balloon on that toolbar. Click that button, and then you'll be able to copy the link I just pasted into the chat window, and you can go check that out to see if the controls you need are supported there. TestComplete can also work with rich Internet applications like Flash, Flex, Air, Ajax, Silverlight, and Java FX. In fact, we're doing a separate webinar dedicated to rich Internet applications later on this month. So again, stay tuned. I'll be sharing that date and time for that in just a few minutes. And before I go to your questions, I just want to mention some of the other products that SmartBear offers. We provide code review tools, performance profiling, and ALM management solutions. And you can head on out to our website, smartbear.com, to look at those and learn more. All right, at this point, let's turn things over to the questions you folks have. Again, one thing to note, if you have questions that are not related to the things we've talked about today, if you've got questions about working with a Windows-based application, if you've got pricing questions, things like that, send those over to our support team or to your account rep. They'll be much better geared to handle those types of situations. Okay, so I'm just expanding my questions panel here. Give me 1 second to find the first question. And the first question is, okay, Nora asks, I've tried to make the toURL string a variable. It seems that a variable with a wildcard doesn't jive together. The string was not recognized. Okay, Nora, I think I'd want to get a little bit more information about your particular scenario there. If you could send a description of what you're doing there to your account representative, and then he or she will get you in touch with the appropriate resource to look into that and get an answer for you. Okay, let's see. Next question, can we turn a keyword test into a load test? No, keyword tests and load tests are going to be separate animals there. Let's see, could you use one of these checks to work with Silverlight? Yes, TestComplete does work with, TestComplete's checkpoints, I should say, do work with Silverlight. And again, you should check out the Rich Internet Applications webinar that we'll be doing later this month. There'll also be another one just on Silverlight early next year. So I'll be talking about that in just a minute. Manoj asks, does the web comparison checkpoint verify text on the page? Yes, absolutely. So when you are looking at a web page and it's got the phrase, hello world on it, then the web comparison checkpoint will verify that the web page does in fact contain hello world. Where I see a lot of people using that is if they need to test, they record their tests, say on a staging environment, and then they're going to run them on a production environment, and they want to make sure that the content is exactly the same between the two places. A web comparison checkpoint's great for that. Jana asks, does the web accessibility perform all checks and compile a list of failures, or does it stop on the first failure? Great question. It will perform all the checks and give you a list of everything that failed. So if you've got multiple things selected there, if you're checking for both link accessibility and alt text, TestComplete will do both those things, and if any of them bomb out, it will stop after it performs all those checks. Okay. Let's see. Vladimir asks, does TestComplete support any WebKit browser? The only browsers that TestComplete supports at this point in time are IE and Firefox. Perry asks, does TestComplete 8 work with multiple instances of IE? Yes, if you've got 2 web pages open, for example, TestComplete will be able to work with each one of them, and it will be able to toggle back and forth between them. Ruby asks, how does TestComplete handle pop-up windows? It'll be able to recognize those just like any other part of a web page. It would see like an Internet Explorer dialog, for example, and you could click OK within that, and then TestComplete would record you performing an action against that dialog and be able to play it back. Okay, Vince asks, how does this work with Flex or Flash for the website? Well, Vince, I think your best bet's going to be to tune in to the Rich Internet Applications webinar that we've got set up for later this month. Okay, Sam asks, any comments or concerns from updating existing tests from 8.0 to 8.1? No, Sam, nothing major there. It was just a minor point release and added a few new features, but from the web testing perspective, everything that you've seen me do today will work just fine. No need to make any changes. Okay, let's see, Nora asks, I see that you clicked remember me when recording. Then when running the test, the checkbox was not remembered as being unchecked. Sometimes in my web app, things are remembered. Any suggestions on how to handle toggles, like if checked, press button, or if already unchecked, don't press? Or do you have to make sure that your states are cleaned up each time you run a test? Okay, Nora, you can build logic into your test cases. Let's do that. Let me go ahead and go back to my administrative screen there. And what you can do is you can build things in. So like, all right, right now the default here is to remember me. And maybe if that box is checked, I want to uncheck it. Otherwise, just leave it alone. So what I could do there is, let's come into my test. I'm going to create an if statement. And I'm going to say if, and we will build this logic. I'm going to say if object property, and this is going to allow me to select an item on screen and verify one of its properties. So I'm going to say on screen object. I'm going to use the Finder tool to select that Remember Me checkbox, which is right there. Okay, and the property I'm going to key off of is its checked property. So that's going to be, let's see, where is it? Checked. Okay, so right there. So checked is true. Okay, so what we're going to say is if that property, if that checked property equals true, then we could do something. We could perform an on-screen action. Otherwise, maybe if it's not true, then what we could do is put in an action to click it. So you'd say, if this object is checked, then do this. If it's not, then do something else. So if we wanted to uncheck that box if it was checked, what we'd say is we'd insert an on-screen action, drag that on there, make it a child of the if statement. You can make it a child. You'll see my little cursor is changed to that blue and white check mark. I'll select the control on screen again. There we go. There's our guy that we care about. And we will set that equal to unchecked. So it's the set checked method, which is right down here. I just scroll to that. Oh no, it's not set checked, it's click. Okay, anyway, but that's the idea. You can go ahead and choose to click that, and then it'll go from there. So you can build logics into the tests. Rodrigo asks, if there are 3 digits, will the test fail? I think, Rodrigo, what you're asking about is if there were multiple numbers here in my object. So right now I started this out with 22 as my name property, and I wildcarded that to the star. So I think what you're asking is if it would change to 222, would the test fail? And the answer to that is no, because what the wildcard is doing is it's saying match anything up to this particular substring of webinar.aspx. So it won't matter if it's 3 characters, 5 characters, whatever. TestComplete will still be able to locate the object. Okay, Kimberly asks, if I want to check that the name is incrementing correctly on those dynamically created names, how do I do that? Just want to make sure I understand the scenario correctly there. I think what you're asking there, Kimberly, is if you want to verify that you were at 22 and now you're at 23. In that case, yes, you could do that. You would need probably write a little bit of logic into your test, which would look at the control on screen and verify that it was set to the appropriate value. I'm trying to think if I can illustrate that really fast. I think the best way to do that is you're going to create a variable inside your test, and that variable would be equal to, say, blog number, and you'd start it out as an integer, and maybe the default value would be 0. Okay, great. And then what you'd want to do is verify that this number plus 1 is what equaled or what was shown inside the test. So what we do here is we build a little bit of logic again into the test case, which would be something to the effect of if we go the on-screen object property, and we would point at that particular control. So we'd look at, let's say it was the email address field, just for sake of argument. So we'd look at that guy, and we'd look for his particular property. In this case, it would be the name prop string. And we want to make sure that name prop string equaled that variable, this guy right here, blog number plus 1. And so that's going to say, okay, that would verify that information is correct. So that's the kind of thing you could do here. Actually, I was wrong there. It's not variable. It's actually going to be code expression for this. Code expression. It's like variable blog number plus 1. So that's how you could verify that type of thing. So now we'd be saying if that name string property equals that variable plus 1, and then we could write a success message out or what have you. Okay. All right, Nora says, with name mapping, I have two page objects which are the same. I had to re-identify the same object later on, which created a duplicate object. How do I combine the two? That's a interesting scenario, Nora. I think I'd like to see your TestComplete project to know exactly what was going on there. If you could send those questions into your account rep, and he or she will help forward the information on to me or somebody else on the team, and we'll go from there. Okay, let's see. Next question. Mention the problem with the tree model, where you have to wildcard a control which is dynamically generated, which is more tedious than having to do it on the DOM model. I don't see any advantage besides it's only on one level in the DOM. Okay, so in short, what's going on there, Cyril, is if you were to use the tree model for that web page that I showed you, you would need to ask your developers to either set static identifiers for every control on the website, which could be very time-consuming and tedious, or you would need to perform name mapping magic for every control leading up to the control you actually cared about. So imagine for a minute, what you saw me do earlier when I wildcarded this guy, this hyperlink, that's the link I'm actually manipulating. Now imagine for a minute I had to wildcard every single parent control in here just to get that single hyperlink. That's a real pain in the rear end, and it's going to be very time-consuming and very tedious. So by flattening it out and looking at the DOM, you only care about one object now, the actual hyperlink, and you don't need to worry about all of its parent controls anymore. Okay, Edward asks, once you switch to DOM or tree, can you switch back? You can switch back, yep. You would probably want to recreate any tests that you've done, though, because at that point, TestComplete is relying on the object model to be in the state that it was set to when you did the recording. So if you've recorded your tests as DOM, keep it as DOM. Otherwise, you'll need to re-record the tests. Okay, I am running my test with input from a spreadsheet. On the web service test, is there a way to make the XML checkpoint a variable? That's a good question, Tammy. I've never been asked that before. You won't be able to do that with the checkpoint itself because that's going to be static. However, you could programmatically call the method. So like right here, we could change this code, and we could just say, give me the return value of this. And now TestComplete will take the results, and instead of doing that comparison, it will store those results inside the return value. And then you could use that to build your own kind of checkpoint type statement. So you'd say, if return value equals, whatever, hello, then log a message, success, else, log a failure, failure, and then you can put more information in there. So that's probably the best approach to take there. If you want to data drive that type of test. Okay, Jeff asks, let's say you have 1 million recorded tests that have a login and password. Can name mapping help in the situation when the password changes? No, name mapping won't be able to help you there, Jeff. What you'll want to do instead is just modularize your tests. So instead of recording 1 million tests and recording the login process 1 million times, what you'll want to do is record the login process once. Put that in its own keyword test, like what I've just done here. I've created this test called login. And now I'm going to call that login test from every other test that I want to log into my site. So let's say that the first action here is going to be to log into the website, and then I do all these other items right here. Easy enough. You come up here, you say run keyword test. You select login. And now you're going to call the login process that's defined here in this login test. And now if that login process changes, you make the change right in there, and everybody else picks it up. Okay. I have selected 32-bit IE, and I want to use this script for 64-bit. Will that work? Yeah, that should work. Padmercy, you should be able to run that, no problem. Okay. Let's see, rolling through here. I'm seeing some questions here that are asking about like platform support for Macs and things like that. Again, folks, your best bet is to send those to the account reps or the support team just so that they can help you out with that. Okay, because we are running out of time with this particular webinar. I do have a few more slides I need to get through. I'm just scrolling through here. And, okay. Does web testing work with HTML frames? Yes, Jennifer, it can. If you have a specific scenario you've got in mind there, just send that over to your account rep and we can go through that. Okay, let's see. Does TestComplete support REST web services that need to authenticate? Not at this point in time, Manur, but we can. That is something that is requested, and I will let the support team know that another person has asked for that so we can bump the request accordingly. All right, great questions, folks. Thanks very much for those. At this point, I'm just going to pop back to a couple of more slides here. I do want to mention some of our upcoming webinars. On December 14th, you can join me for a demonstration of some of the more sophisticated things you can do with name mapping. We'll talk about how you can use it to hunt for controls on a web page. We'll talk about how you can set it up to use conditional statements as well. On December 16th, you can join us for a discussion with the authors of the brand new O'Reilly book, Making Software, What Works and Why We Really Believe It. You can register for that up at www.smartbear.com. And for those of you who are on Twitter, go ahead and tweet about that webinar for a chance to actually win a copy of the book. And then on December 21st, I'll be back again giving a session on how TestComplete can work with the Adobe product set of rich internet applications, Air, Flex, and Flash. So you can register for all these webinars up on our website. And really appreciate your time and attention today, folks. Thank you for attending. If you enjoyed today's presentation, my name is Nick. If you did not enjoy today's presentation, my name is Rodney. Thanks a lot, folks, and have a great day.